Good morning to you, everybody. This is Jane Smith. You probably remember her from joining us on the Raw Report, where Jane, well, actually, your video just haunted so many people, Jane. It was of you talking to your mum down the line. Your mum was captured on video. She was in an elderly care home. And sadly, she was caught up in the care home scandal, where government failed to protect the elderly and then isolated them from their loved ones and continue to do. And sad to say, unfortunately, Jane's mum has now passed away. I'm so sorry about that, Jane. And Jane, unfortunately, is also dealing with cancer at the same time as all of this. And I'm equally sorry about that, Jane. And you've just been through so much, frankly. It's just horrendous. But Jane, you are continuing your campaign because, you know, care homes are still restricted. But tell us some of the, share with our viewers some of the things that you've told me and the problems that occurred with your mum at the end of her life.
So why I'm here is that so many still don't have access to their loved ones. Those that are lucky that do have access may have 20 minutes a week. And care home life expectancy is a maximum of 18 to 24 months. So most people have been locked up for 19 months. You've got the brilliant care homes that have allowed access for a long, long time. But these poor care homes, and how dare they call themselves a care home, they've just locked people away and they won't let relatives in. Yeah. So in some cases, you've got one relative doing 20 minutes a week, but there's the grandchildren, there's multiple siblings want to get in to see their loved ones before the inevitable happens.
Say to me.
Hello, Lucy.
Oh, hello. I love you so much. Oh, it's so nice to see you. Are you glad I'm here? Good.
And we love each other.
We do love each other. We love each other very much, don't we?
Mm.
Good. And I can say Happy Mother's Day.
Yes.
Yeah.
In some care homes, there was a lady on the top floor separated from her husband on the bottom floor. She had dementia, and the care home felt that they got the right to tell the family, don't visit her because she gets upset when she sees you. And they've separated the two, and the husband has now died. The family are carrying the fact that he's dead. She doesn't know he's dead, and they never met each other before they died. It's as if they're playing little Hitlers. They're interpreting the guidance, and the government won't mandate. If the government mandate, then everybody should be allowed to see their care home loved one. What about their human rights?
Yes.
You know, it's madness what is going on, and mainstream media just won't air this. They air it occasionally, but they don't keep on with it. Whereas if it's an alpaca, then it gets headline news every day. Or if it's children, then obviously, but for one reason, the elderly
become invisible.
Yeah, they don't seem to matter at all.
It's horrendous. On one of your last visits, before you managed to actually move your mum from the home, you had to have a supervised visit. You were accused of unreasonable behaviour. They said, if you don't modify your behaviour, we will ban you from the home. You were sat in the car. You had to have a COVID test, but the man who was supervising your mum did not have a COVID test. You were basically treated like a criminal. And obviously, it's put you under tremendous stress. You're dealing with PTSD. You've been waking up in the night screaming. It's horrendous what your mum and you had to endure in her final weeks.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. When a carer, and I got on very well with 99% of the carers, when a carer says to you, are you okay? The floodgates open. You start telling them, no, I'm not okay. Look what you're doing to my mum. You're locking her up. You're keeping her away from family. And then they accused me of unacceptable behaviour. So yes, I did have a supervised visit, and I was appalled to find out that the person supervising me hadn't had the test. So I had to wait another half an hour to make sure that he did have a test so that he could then come in with me. But this is a stranger in the room with me and my mum. It's the human rights side of things. You know, they are playing little gods, little Hitlers. Their behaviour is appalling. They are not caring. They say they're protecting mum, and they were trying to protect her from COVID, but they didn't protect her from COVID. They let it in twice. So her discharge was delayed. They wouldn't let me be an essential caregiver. So the government says people can be essential caregivers. They wouldn't let me. They decided that they could provide everything my mum needed. I mean, how dare they? They cannot provide family love, the memories we've got, the memories we share. It's appalling. And most people are scared to talk up, because as soon as you talk up, first of all, they'll ban your loved one from the home, unpick them. And secondly, they'll ban you so you can't get in. And it's almost as if it's become easier, well, it has become much easier not to have relatives in, because we pick up problems. I'd always picked up multiple problems with mum and her hearing aids and raising her legs so her feet didn't swell. But after lockdown, it's just accelerated. So on the day mum was discharged, the discharge was by the care home manager and the senior nurse as well. So the two of them were doing the discharge. The ambulance came and they were fantastic. We got mum to the new care home, who'd, even before we got there, agreed that I could be an essential caregiver. So I ended up seeing mum 3 times a week for 2 hours a day, which was fantastic. So we got there and I was trying to get her hearing aid in because it wouldn't fit in properly. And I still couldn't get in. So I was looking at it and I realised it wasn't mum's hearing aid. So I got in touch with audiology at the hospital, found out, no, it wasn't mum's hearing aid. Now, mum had been in a room by herself for 6 months. So how the hell did she have somebody else's hearing aid in her ear? And it wouldn't go in her ear, it was too big. So there was some other bloke somewhere without a hearing aid, or with mum's, that was rattling around in his ear. So I made some complaints. As soon as, mum had arrived, her feet were in a disgusting condition. They'd not had a chiropodist in for God knows how long. So the care,
I mean, it's horrendous, Jane. Some of the things you told me on your mum's last day, that was when they realised that the previous care home had forgotten to send your mum's end-of-life medication. You watched your mum in pain for an hour. They had to go and get her meds from the old care home. And as you say, they gave your mum someone else's hearing aid. This is negligence of a high order. And during this time, on your mum's last day, you went to the doctor to find out you needed 2 breast cancer surgeries. Goodness sake, you came back straight away from the appointment and your mum was finally peaceful and resting. But here's the thing. This is powerful, it's poignant, it's wrong. But as you were very keen to point out to me, all of this has actually triggered some much needed improvements. And that is also vital to acknowledge. What has improved as a consequence of the absolute misery that you and your poor mum had to go through?
Well, I've been in touch with the GP. I had to fight with the GP and public health for the local council about end-of-life definitions. Eventually, they apologised and agreed that I was right because they weren't following the NHS guidance. So they've changed that. The home themselves, the manager wasn't trained properly to do risk assessments. So the risk assessments had errors in it, and I tried to point it out, but because in that home, the father of the care manager is the CEO. So when I pointed out some errors, he said it was fine. So it's very incestuous. When I made a complaint about mum's pain, it was avoidable. She didn't have to die in pain, and I will never forget that, and I will never forgive them for that. She was in pain for an hour, and that was appalling. And that was because they didn't send these drugs, because they didn't do a proper medicines reconciliation. They then had 5 weeks to pick it up because they should have checked the controlled drug tally, and they didn't do that properly. So they have now, yes, brought in changes, but I made a complaint first to CQC. Because the changes had been made, they signed off that complaint. Then I complained to the council. They were better. The safeguarding team looked at it, but the care home came back and told me that, yes, they did make an error on the controlled drugs, but as regards mum's, as regards the discharge, which was the root cause of that error, it was it was an oversight. How dare they call it an oversight that left my mum? They have not apologised for that oversight. And I am just so angry with them, but I've got no rights. Nobody has a right. The council agreed with me, but the care home have refused to change their wording. And we don't have rights. Mum didn't have rights. I don't have rights. Relatives don't have rights. You go to the ombudsman, it takes them 6 months to look at a case. We are just stuck here, and we need people to shout out. All these loved ones, vulnerable, some are sons, daughters, mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, and they're alone. So many of them, and it doesn't have to be this way. We need people to get together and shout about it, tell everybody about it, tell your MPs, do something about it, because it's not right.
No, and we know that they lied when Matt Hancock stood up and said we threw a protective ring around the elderly care homes. That was an outright lie. We know it was. So Jane, I'm just looking at some of the messages to you. The first says, with you all the way, Jane, my mother died last year alone and frightened in a care home. No access, horrible time. I understand it completely. Peter says, this is madness. So sorry for the residents and their families. Tahia says, I, Jane, bless you. May your mum rest in peace and please stay strong. The first said they put my mother's belongings in bin bags and put them in the car park. I mean, this is horrendous. The disrespect. Enio says, shocking and disgraceful treatment of Jane and her mum. Total scumbags who are responsible for what happened. They must be investigated. This is evil. Kimmy says, oh, Jane, God bless you. My wee mummy is 86 and thankfully she's pretty well and at home. I can't imagine not being able to see my mum. These care homes need to wise up. And some people are going even further and saying these are murder homes more like. Peter says, so sorry you've had to endure this, Jane, and thank you for telling us the appalling experience you've had. And that's the thing, is that as painful as it is for Jane, Jane is continuing, because Jane is a trooper. And Jane realizes that this is such a massive issue. And because Jane has been so outspoken and was prepared to be outspoken, regardless of what was coming to her for doing so, people have contacted you, haven't they, Jane, from all over the world. This is a similar story being replayed everywhere, isn't it? Ireland, America, it's happening everywhere.
It is. And it's often even the basics. You know, I'd go and visit mum or I'd see her and she wasn't wearing her clothes. It would be somebody else's clothes that she had on. There were stories that when relatives did get in, they found Christmas presents at the bottoms of wardrobes that hadn't been given at Christmas time. It's just the basic care in some places that is really poor. And often those places have been passed by CQC. CQC either didn't get in, they've just taken what was told to them at face value, and relatives haven't been able to get in and see and monitor what's going on. It's as if the safeguard has gone now. Care homes are doing what they want, and you've got some brilliant examples of care homes, but you've got some very poor ones, and our loved ones are suffering because of it. And even after mum's death, we got an email not shortly after, and it was for a charge, and we queried it, only to be told that, oh yes, if your loved one dies, you have to pay a retainer on her room. So even though I emptied it like the day after, we still have to pay sometimes up to a week money on a dead person's room. I mean, that is just appalling. And the councils have agreed this with different care homes. It's just sick.
Yeah, it is absolutely disgusting. I mean, people are just like totally in your corner with this. How can people find you online and support what you're doing, Jane?
Well, online, we're on Twitter and on Facebook. Our group is called Unlock Care Homes, Care Unlock. So we've got a campaign group. I have campaigned in our local high street. We are trying to up this because it's going on and we can't believe it's going on. We have had people go up to Parliament Square and campaign there, but we are small numbers of people scattered around the country. There are several groups that sort of are on Twitter and are on Facebook, residents groups. So please, if you can do anything, write to your MP, just raise awareness of what is going on. This is so wrong and it's happening everywhere in the country. I've written to my 65 local councillors, and of those 65, 2 or 3 got back to me and were very empathic. The rest of them haven't replied. The director of the local council, again, he just quotes government guidance, and it's that's key to it. It's government guidance. So because it's guidance, people don't have to follow. It needs to be mandated. And the only person really speaking up is Harriet Harman, from the chair of the Campaign for Human Rights Parliamentary Committee, and Lord Hewitt. So Mark Harper has spoken out. A few people have spoken out, but we need more people speaking out, asking questions about what is going on. How can our elderly just be locked away? And not just our elderly, how can younger people as well with learning disabilities and other diseases, how can they be locked away and forgotten? Don't forget them, find out what's going on. Let us have access to them. They need their family, particularly when it's the end of their life.
Absolutely, Jane, I completely agree with you, couldn't agree with you anymore. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to let you go, but we will get this video prepared for you as a tribute to your dear mum and to you for your absolute amazing work. Take good care of yourself, Jane. There's so much love for you in the comments. Speak to you very soon.
Thanks, Sonia. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.